Hello and welcome to the ATARC Emerging Technology Virtual Summit. For those who do not know, my name is Kirsten Patton and I'm the Working Group Program Manager here at ATARC. ATARC stands for the Advanced Technology Academic Research Center, and we are a nonprofit that facilitates collaboration between government, industry, and academia in order to accelerate technology modernization initiatives. We provide ongoing opportunities for cross-agency collaboration through on-site interaction, learning, and market research. Thank you to our sponsors today, Pivot3, Pluralsight, Checkpoint, and Microfocus for partnering with us on this event. Additionally, I would like to thank you all for joining us this morning. Today will be a day full of action-packed panels and presentations all surrounding emerging technology within the federal government. We hope you enjoy this informative session, and I would also like to remind you that after each presentation, there will be time for a Q&A. So please place all of your questions in the Q&A box on your screen down below. I would also like to remind you to answer the poll questions throughout today's panels if you would like to be eligible for CPE credits. Up first, I would like to introduce our visionary keynote for the day, Ron Thompson. Ron is the Chief Data Officer and the Deputy Digital Transformation Officer over at NASA. Ron, over to you.
Thank you, Kirsten, and just want to welcome our friends out in the virtual land for our session today for Emerging Technology, our virtual summit. So I know there's going to be a lot of great information, great dialogue in our discussion. But first, let me sort of tell the NASA story and what emerging technology means for us. You just look at over the last 18 months now, and how the world has changed, and a lot of that was due to the foresight that we've had with our technology and looking at a different way of working. And I'm going to touch on that future of work in a minute. And we do have our first panel that will be touching on the workforce coming up. But if you look at NASA and our our mission and what we've been able to accomplish over the last 18 months has been phenomenal. We've landed robotic missions on Mars, actually have flown a helicopter on Mars, and continue to launch at cadence that is really phenomenal, giving all the situation we're in right now. So a lot of that is really the diversity of our workforce and how we are actually delivering our mission, constantly delivering our mission. But the dependence of that is our tech, right? So we have not only our information technology tech, but we also have space tech, right? We have science tech. And we are going through our digital transformation effort. We're about in our third year. The first 2 years were set in place to do a lot of formulation and a lot of research on exactly what we should be attacking. So that work was done, and we identified 6 key strategic thrusts to transform our workforce, and workplace. And the 6 strategic thrusts, 3 of them directly linked to emerging technologies. And I'll just highlight all 6 just briefly, and then just go into the 3 that really touch on emerging technology. And the 6 thrusts are artificial intelligence, machine learning, and we put robotic process automation in there as well. We have our data thrust, and that is our core foundational element on how we interoperate and exchange data within the agency, and work with other federal partners external to NASA as well. Our culture and workforce, and as I mentioned, we do have a panel on workforce coming up next. So that is where we look at how we work, why we work the way we do, and taking a look at our operating model and how the agency works. We have our process transformation, and that is basically how we do our routine processes and how we govern the agency, for example, how we do our repeatable work. And we're looking at robotics process automation, and we do have a really good story on that to tell for NASA. We are a leader across government in that space, where we can take routine work and bring in automation and deliver higher value work for our employees. We have our model-based everything, and that's basically looking at how we, in our aeronautic space, how we actually take virtual models, digital twins of what we build, and to do what if trade-offs, and to do design and safety aspects of everything in what we build. And then we have our collaboration thrust, and that's how we communicate not only internally to NASA but externally to NASA too. So you take a look at what does that mean, collaboration. That is how we do video calls like we have today. That's how we exchange information with our partners. That's how we work collaboratively. That's how we right now in our pandemic, and we're starting to slowly have that hybrid mode of coming back into the office. So that collaboration and that functionality and those tool sets are extremely important to have that integrated immersive experience. So I'll just highlight on our Future of Work initiative, and that is really applicable today. So we are taking a look at an agency of how we are going to operate in a hybrid mode moving forward. We do realize that we won't be totally virtual. We will not be fully 100% in person as well. But what does that hybrid mode look like? And we're looking at emerging technologies. We're looking at immersive ways of having a rich experience that is not cumbersome, that is highly integrated for our workforce, and that obviously adds value to mission. That's everything we do adds value to mission here at NASA. So we're really taking a look at how that operating model works, what tools, what capabilities, what what does that experience look like? Right now, I will say it is a learning opportunity, not only for NASA but others in the federal workspace as well as our commercial partners. Everybody's dealing with the same thing, right? So Kirsten, I just want to highlight our artificial intelligence and machine learning. That is an area that we see a lot of great promise in. I mentioned the Perseverance mission, the robotics mission on Mars. We just had a landing a couple months ago on that. That was all done autonomously through AI, and it was a just wonderful moment to be witnessed and to be part of, to see how well that robotic mission performed and how well that artificial intelligence actually worked on board the spacecraft and successfully landed. And now it's going about its business of taking samples of Mars so we can learn about the planet, learn about the history of that planet. And we do have follow-on missions where we'll collect those samples and bring those samples back to Earth to study, and just like we did when we landed on the moon many decades ago. And then lastly, just want to highlight our return to the moon. So in a very short amount of time, we will return to the moon, and our first woman and next man will be on that mission. And you'll be seeing that launch of Artemis 1 later this year or early next year. So we're excited about that. The first launch will not be manned. It will be uncrewed, but it will give us the knowledge and awareness we need to be successful landing that crewed mission. And then we continue to support, obviously, the International Space Station. So, Kirsten, that's just some of the things we're doing here at NASA and the importance of emerging technology and why this topic is really, really applicable today for us, for NASA, and I would argue applicable for other agencies and other organizations as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ron. It's always a pleasure hearing from you. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Kirsten. Thank you for having me.
Of course. So next up, we will be hearing from our first Tech Talk of the day. For this Tech Talk, we will be hearing from Mike Dunbar. Mike is the Chief Revenue Officer over at Pivot 3. Mike, over to you.
Thanks, Kirsten. And as introduced, I am the Chief Revenue Officer at Pivot 3, and I want to just take a few minutes this morning and kind of introduce you to the company and some of the things we're doing within the federal government, both DoD and civilian sector sides. But one of the things that I want to highlight is our concept of smart infrastructure for mission critical video. And what this really is, it's an on-premise cloud. So Throughout the presentation, I'm going to highlight the benefits of using software to innovate and bring a higher scale of resiliency, performance, very cost-effective aspects to what I would argue has been an aging video surveillance infrastructure approach. So if we could go to the next slide, please. Awesome. Pivot 3 has been around since 2008. We have roughly 22,000 systems installed across the globe, 65 countries. You can see there. We've been talked about by Gartner, IDC, Forrester, all of the normal players. And we've been innovating for years around the concept of resilience, performance, scalability, and then intelligence and automation in the video surveillance market. And I'd also like to expand that to talk about what we call mixed security workloads. So, especially for our federal customers, the concept of a unified architecture where it's video, it's access control, it might be analytics, it might be feeding other intelligent systems. But Pivot 3 has been innovating in that area for many years now. Next slide, please. We just splashed some logos up there, obviously protecting, privacy of our customers and the specific departments, but we have a broad range of customers, both across the Defense Department as well as federal civilian sectors, and generally in areas where you would expect video to be highly, highly critical and absolutely part of the mission. Next slide, please. So I think you'd have to be in a cave not to have noticed the recent cyber attack against the pipeline. I think that's normal. That's not an anomaly, right? I think in today's environment, both physical and cyber threats are increasing and evolving. I heard my predecessor talk about AI, machine learning. The bad guys use that too, right? So I think we're just stuck with a world where there'll be increasing attempts to expose and penetrate our federal entities. So that's an environment we'll live in. I think the need for agencies to not only record, right, not only capture video for the purpose of safety or for access control or typical reasons, but more and more folks need to act on that video in real time, and they need to run that video through different analysis types of systems, and that very much could be a lot about AI and ML. It could just be your video management system feeding other governmental developed systems, but I think the days of recording video, tucking it away for safekeeping has passed. Most agencies that are doing video surveillance infrastructure right are acting on that information in real time. And then the other thing, the video market is growing exponentially. Is not a stretch of a term. Whether it's higher resolution cameras, it's various compliance and regulations mandating longer retention times. The amount of video you have to store is growing, and it creates quite a challenge. And of course, the markets we sell into, which the federal government is a large one, there's zero tolerance for downtime or video loss. It's not acceptable to lose a few seconds of video. And for those of you that know a little bit about how video is captured and stored, you could lose a second of just the wrong point of video, and it ended up costing you minutes. So it really is a technology where you have to capture that live stream, because unlike maybe the data world where there's a server, there's an endpoint, there's a request for information, there's an acknowledgement. If you don't quite sync that up, you ask again, you get it. But in video, it's streaming real time, and you got to capture it and you got to store it and protect it. So that is the nature of the beast in this game. It presents some very unique challenges. Next slide, please. and we'll roll forward. Thank you. Just a little bit, kind of when I say intelligence solves the biggest video challenges, and we'll keep coming back to that concept of software. Traditionally this market has been served by two ends of the spectrum, either what they call an NVR or a recording server on kind of the lower end of the market, right? It's just a server, some number of cameras record to that server, it runs some version of RAID, everything goes well, you don't lose the video, right? Not really an enterprise approach. Typical enterprise approaches to other data center storage problems. Again, we typically call that three-tier architecture, where you have some servers doing some processing, you have some networking, and you have a back end something or other, right? Probably a SAN. The problem is conventional methods aren't really suited to video, right? The way you protect data in a data center when it's about database applications or other business apps, you do replication, or you do snapshots, you do backups, you use cloud, public cloud maybe. In video, the storage of video is so immense, it's not logical to replicate it. By the time you replicate it, it's days, it could be weeks, depending on the volume of it. It doesn't create a real-time mechanism to protect that video. So we see, traditional data center type storage architectures not being suited for mission critical video space. And of course, it's got to be scalable. So we'll come back to that point. And we can roll to the next slide, please. So just a little bit, short amount of time we have this morning. I'm not going to get down in the weeds on the technology, but if you remember, I mentioned that concept of an NVR, a recording server, just a 2U server, multiple drives in it, 12, 16 drives. In the old world, a fixed number of cameras would write to one server, a fixed number of cameras would write to another server. You'd have pools of video storage. What Pivot 3 does, we leverage virtualization to do something the industry calls software-defined storage, or you may have heard the term hyper-converged, right? So we actually put a virtualization layer on that server, and then our software, we call it Acuity, but our Pivot 3 software sets down in that virtual machine, and it creates a giant virtual storage pool across all of those nodes. So what that does for you as the end user, it creates a very, very high degree of resiliency, and you never drop frames. There's a fast NVMe PCIe flash ingest layer, so that sustained performance and never dropping a frame, never losing video. You scale out by just slotting in another node. So if you could conceptualize, you see a 3-node array in that picture, giant virtual SAN, industry requirements for storage change, one business unit adds more cameras, the mission changes, you literally slot another node in, the giant virtual storage pool rebalances, and that's how you scale out. So, incredibly efficient and both cost and scale out. And also the complexity. When we developed the technology, we had an industry in mind that it was all about the mission of security. Sometimes less IT expertise. We sold to law enforcement, to folks who staffed people with the mission of physical and video security, not necessarily data center IT expertise. So we looked for a solution that would go in easy, be simple to manage, and very seamless in the scale out. Next slide, please. So just what is the portfolio? And we're gonna build this slide out a little bit, but to start, you can see on the left side of the screen there, there's an edge component. And when you think edge, think sprawling campus and maybe a warehouse, or think of an airport with the parking garage. So not the core storage, that's the bottom. So we very much operate in that core multi-petabyte video storage space. We call that our surveillance series. We also have an edge series, same benefits of hyperconverged, the virtual storage pool, the virtual SAN, the failover on the nodes, but just tuned to more of an edge-like scenario. And then if you roll your eyes to the right side of the screen, we have a line of what we call essentials products, which is really for that scenario where I just need a physical server. That's not often in video, but it could be, you could be running an access control system on there. It could be a scenario where you're not worried about node failover. So we call that our essentials line. And then if you click the next slide, please. Should build this one out. Yep. We leverage software, not only the software that's on our surveillance series core and edge, but also we could drop software on existing generic recording servers in your environment, or the branded NVRs. I won't say the names. They're out there. You're either buying a branded recording server, or you might be doing a white box or building your own. There's analytics servers, whether you're running some of the industry-leading analytics apps, or again building your own. There's a need for compute for those types of applications along with the video. So we actually have software that we would drop on those boxes to pull that all back into a single management framework where you could monitor the performance and health of that hardware out there, the non-pivot 3 hardware, and you get one single unified picture of the infrastructure. So go ahead and click one more slide, please, and then probably one more, and we'll complete this build. And then the final part of that, after I have the edge covered, the core covered, I've got management software on parts of my infrastructure that I may eventually be looking to refresh. You've got to pull that back and be able to visualize it. So we call that our VSOC offering. It's essentially VDI, right? Tuned for video. The government has adopted VDI in many ways across many entities. I'm sure you're familiar with that concept, but what we've seen is your standard VDI, doesn't perform well out of the box when it's video. It's a really dense workload, right? So there's things, it's got to be tuned just right. You've got to leverage the GPUs. So we've added a part of our offering that helps with that visualization. So whether you're just looking to virtualize your SOC or push that video securely to some endpoint, an iPad, a remote, DR site, whatever, we allow that core unified management framework to be extended to the very, very edge. So the workers can work where they are versus being in the SOC. Next slide, please. So, if I were to summarize, again, we're doing this through software innovation, right? You buy a piece of hardware to serve a specific purpose. You can upgrade the RAM, you can do different things to it, but at the end of the day, it's just a piece of hardware. Generally, you get more performance, more features, on a 3, 5, 7-year refresh, right? This concept of, virtualization in general, or software-defined anything, is about leveraging software innovation to make the hardware better. We can come out with a software release that doubles the throughput of the hardware, as an example. So what I want to leave you with is this concept of enterprise class video management storage and real-time action via analytics or other. It requires software innovation into this market. And that's our Acuity product. That's our Surety product. It's a unified management application that can all be managed from an on-prem perspective or from the cloud. But whatever your choice there is, I think today's environment around the capture and the real-time analysis of video, it's not just something we tuck away. The entities we support are leveraging that video to move planes around, gate to gate. They leverage it to get trained safely in and out of the station. All the features from a security and risk mitigation perspective. So it's something we hope to be able to continue to do especially for our federal government customers whose mission is oh so critical. So that's what I had for you this morning. I wanted to land this on time, so I apologize if I talked a little quickly, but if one more slide, please. If there's any additional questions, you can shoot an email to that alias you see on the screen, dg@pivot3.com, and somebody will get back to you very quickly. But thanks for the time this morning. I appreciated the chance to have a chat.
That was perfect, Mike. Thank you so much.
You bet.
Up next, we have our first panel of the day, which I have the pleasure of moderating. Just as a reminder, as we go throughout, please put any questions that you have for our panelists in the Q&A box down below. And additionally, also don't forget to answer the poll questions, which will ensure that you are eligible for your CPE credits today. Now on to introducing our panelists. If our panelists could please come on camera, see who we have here. And you can go ahead and unmute yourself if you'd like. All right, awesome. We have Alicia Johnson with Platform Solutions Division at the Department of Homeland Security. We also have John Sullivan, the Director of Digital Strategies Division at the General Services Administration. We also have Charles Chang, IT Specialist at Small Business Administration. Brian Fox, Strategist at 18F within General Services Administration. Tony Holmes, Practice Lead for Solution Architects, Public Sector at Pluralsight. And we also have Mitch Winans, who is the advisor within the Enterprise Digitization and Case Management Office within the Internal Revenue Service. So awesome lineup. Thank you guys for being here today. This first segment of our panel discussion, I'll want each of you to please provide the audience with a little bit more of an overview about what it is that you're currently working on at your department and anything else that you think might be relevant information to kick off this discussion for our audience. If we could please hear from Alicia first.
Sure. Good morning. As Kirsten said, I'm Alicia Johnson, and I support the Platform Solutions Division within the OCIO's office. What our organization has been tasked to do is assist the applications that are exiting the data centers to a cloud environment. So we help customers determine whether or not the Amazon cloud is a best fit, or if Azure is a better fit for their mission and their strategic goals moving forward. We help them onboard, and we provide operations and maintenance for their applications for their entire life cycle. And that's what we're doing today.
Thank you. Charles, would love to hear from you next. You're on mute, Charles.
Never happens. There we go.
Good morning, everyone. Sorry about that. Yeah, I'm a IT specialist at SBA. I'm part of the OCIO office, and our program office is within OCIO is called Business Technology Solutions. My focus is on robotic services, which includes automation, intelligent chatbots, to enhance SBA's ability to deliver better customer experience, as well as be able to handle future surges to SBA resources. So we're working primarily focused on to deliver prototypes to demonstrate the value of automation. It is I would say, we're relatively new in the robotics space. However, we believe that there is tremendous potential, since given the SBA's smaller footprint in terms of the number of people that we have, but then the surges that we had to face recently due to COVID-19 in delivering, PPP, idle, shutter venue programs, having automation will really help us, handle the additional capacity that's needed. So nice to meet you all.
Thanks, Charles. Over to John next.
Thanks, Kristen, and thanks for being here. Following what Ron was saying, yes, AI, machine learning are a huge part of our focus in our application portfolio. We're using machine learning particularly to help sort through our right requirements in acquisitions as they hit the street, et cetera. So we're definitely building that into our workforce. But I lead this digital strategies group, which is somewhat new, somewhat old programs that have been around for a while. But part of our goal is to make sure that, our outreach to agencies, we are an internal government to government consulting group within OSGAR policy. That's what we do on implementing IT policy across at least the executive branch. And one of those is around, if we're really going to make the pivot to digital government and digital service delivery, what are the organizational and management changes you need to make to actually do that? How do you go from, oh, I run a federal program and I have a website that I sometimes remember to update and sometimes I don't, to no, this is your digital front door. It must serve your customer. It must be treated as critical infrastructure for your programs. And so how do you do that? With that, and Kristen, I don't know if you want me to do it now or a little bit later, specifics around when you're going to doing the virtual workforce and what's happened this year, as the government is making, and this administration is making a huge press for diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. One of our programs is the Section 508 Rehabilitation Act. We advise agencies on how to do digital accessibility. And there's a lot to that, and a lot of that within the virtual meeting space that I'd like to explain. And that'll be different from the rest of the presentations here. So when you're ready.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll definitely dive into that. And Brian, over to you, please.
Yeah, Kirsten, thanks for that. So I'm Brian Fox within 18F. I'm the current director of the National Security Intelligence Portfolio. So within this space, we're doing a lot to collaborate with Defense Digital Services and other folks within government. As John described, we are an internal consultancy here at 18F, and so just working with a lot of our defense and intel partners to help modernize their systems. But to back out a little bit, 18F, as you'd imagine, is really busy with the new administration and their priorities around diversity, inclusion, and equity, climate change, and then just COVID response. All of those have a digital aspect to it. So 18F is fully engaged and working well with many of our federal partners, and now even some state and local. We've got a project with the state of Wisconsin that's going well, because as we all know, many of the capabilities that Americans rely on aren't at the federal level, it's at that state and local. So a lot is happening, and we're really excited. And if I hadn't said it before, really busy, but really excited to just really stoked to be having an opportunity to create a wonderful impact. So,
thank you. And Tony?
Hello. Good morning. I'm Tony Holmes. As already mentioned, I lead the Solutions Architects Public Sector practice at Pluralsight. Our organization is focused on partnering with the public sector, and happy to note GSA, IRS, SBA, and DHS all as partners of ours that we're already working with. So thank you for that, everyone on the panel. Our job, or our mission, if you like, is to help organizations develop critical skills in response to the incoming challenges of new technologies and converging technologies, things like cloud, artificial intelligence, machine learning, all of the other things that you're going to hear about today. And we do that by creating tools that give you analytics into understanding where your skill gaps are, what your skill inventories look like, and wrapping AI and machine learning around that, give you the ability to actually understand return on investment of learning, rather than using traditional modalities to understand and assess that. So I'm here to talk about those things today.
Thank you. And Mitch?
Thanks, Kirsten. Good morning, everybody. A big thank you to Kirsten and Alyssa and Melissa and everybody from ATARC for hosting today's event. Really happy to be a part of this conversation on these important topics. So again, my name is Mitch Winans. I am a senior advisor with the IRS's Enterprise Digitalization and Case Management Office. I focus on the digitalization portfolio and primarily lead our organizational development and our strategic planning and initiatives for a new digitalization team. To give a little background on our Enterprise Digitalization and Case Management Office, our organization was just stood up last summer, so we're going on, I think, about 9 months old, 10 months old now. But our mission is to enhance the taxpayer experience and IRS employee experience through modernizing and consolidating legacy systems, simplifying and reimagining business processes, and empowering taxpayers and employees to rapidly resolve issues through simplified digital tools or digital environments. So really focusing on those self-service type of applications. So from there, the digitalization portfolio centers around 3 strategic goals or concentration areas. The first goal is to reduce the paper volume across the IRS. So that's looking at paper that's incoming, paper that's internally generated, or paper that's externally sent. The second strategic goal is to increase our access to digital data across the IRS. So in other words, how can we get our data and our documents and our information in a machine readable format so that we can leverage tools like AI and automation and data analytics to effectively evaluate, categorize, and classify the information, get it in the hands of the right end users so they can make better business decisions and data-driven choices. The third strategic goal is to help prepare the IRS to effectively manage and leverage digital data, particularly as we wrap our heads around everything the next couple of years and get more access to it and kind of achieve those prior 2 goals. So from there, the digitalization team is essentially looking at what's the best combination of policy and business process and technology that can help us achieve those 3 digital strategic goals and just create a more digitally driven agency. So hope that's a little helpful background, but I look forward to the conversation today. Thanks, Kirsten.
Yeah, thank you guys. All right, so the first round of questions are going to focus on opportunities, benefits that emerging tech and telework has provided during the COVID-19 pandemic. Friendly reminder to our panelists, we have a lot of territory to cover, so please try and keep your answers under 2 minutes. But we will first pop up our poll question for the day. So those at home, go ahead and answer. What are some of the opportunities and or benefits that emerging technology and telework has provided to your agency during the COVID-19 response? Some of these answers include rapid scale, better work-life balance, reskilling, no benefits at all, it sucks, or you are neutral on this. So go ahead and answer that if you'd like. Jumping into the first question, this one is for Charles. Pretty much just what the poll said, actually. What are some of the opportunities or benefits that emerging technology and telework has provided to your agency during the COVID-19 pandemic? Do you have any examples of this?
Yeah, Kristen. Yeah, definitely. Thank you. For during the COVID-19, SBA had to handle I would say an insane amount of additional federal funding, right, to help with the Paycheck Protection Program, help with the restaurants, small businesses. And as a result, SBA had to onboard, I think, a magnitude of additional call center agents to handle the increasing volume of phone calls, as well as inquiries about the program that's being offered. In addition, they had to work with the various banks to actually validate, verify people that qualify for the programs. So a lot of the business processes, as well as the customer increase, really needed to scale. So I think that's one of the biggest things that SBA had to experience. The other thing I think SBA could have benefited from was if we had additional automation in chat bots and so forth that would help with the customer experience or handle the increasing volume of requests, as well as automation, right? Simplifying the business processes that it had. It could have probably done also a better job at, handling the surge. So those are 2 things that, based on the poll, we had to deal with: scaling as well as being able to automate certain things.
Thank you for that. And Brian, what did the pandemic highlight about your agency in particular? Did you feel like 18F was prepared?
Absolutely. From an internal standpoint, it was really interesting that, as Charles points out, many Americans, many government agencies, not just at the federal, but state and local, were under a lot of stress. At least work at 18F, the day before COVID and the day after, it was the same. So I think silver lining, it highlighted the importance of an organization that was remote first, and had all the the people culture aspects so everyone is well aware of and well prepared to work remotely at home. You're seeing I'm in my kitchen right now with my living room in the background, right? But also the processes in place. So part of that is agile methodology, stand-up meetings every morning. But then the culture to go along with that, the transparency, we're very open. Like I'm having glass repaired in my bathroom today, so I'll be offline for about a half hour, and people just being real open about that healthy work-life balance that goes with it. And then last, but definitely not least, is the tools. And that's, we are lucky here in GSA to have Google Suite. So Google Docs allows for collaborative, dynamic on the fly production of documents and reports. We also use Mural with our partners and internally, which gives us kind of a whiteboard, a digital whiteboard experience. And then can't say enough about Slack. We're also in Slack. So that keeps us all synced. One last thing would just be external. Before COVID, as 18F is a digital consultancy fed to fed, before COVID, a lot of agencies that are in the office thought of us as kind of an interesting curiosity. Oh, you all get to work at home. That's kind of neat. After COVID, they were, in many cases, we're in the midst of working with a group to modernize. They're learning as much about the people, process, and culture of working remotely. How do we get our workforce productive? How do we as leaders get more comfortable with this separation, not being able to look over shoulders or whatever? So all of that culture related to management and leadership has been really huge. I'm in the defense and intelligence space. So last fall, we did a project with the Defense Intelligence Agency, one of the intel centers there, and they have half of their workforce at home. And so an intelligence agency learning a lot from us just around that culture was wonderful as well. But that's been happening over the last year and a half with all of our engagements, whether it's public benefits, justice related, defense and intelligence. So
yeah.
Back to you, Kristen.
Thank you. Yeah, it looked like the results flashed on the screen really quickly as you were speaking, but it seemed like most people said better work-life balance was one of the benefits. So that's great to hear. Actually, based off your answer, I'm going to go ahead and call for the next poll question because it kind of plays into that. Alyssa, if you could please put that up. What did the pandemic highlight about your agency in particular? Please respond whether you were ready for it, you were unprepared, you shifted fast to accommodate, or you're still trying to figure everything out. So go ahead and answer that if you'd like to receive your CPE credit today. And Tony, this one's for you. How do you see the pandemic impacting productivity as it relates to remote work? Good, bad effects? What are your experiences and thoughts on that?
I think one of the things to remember is that when the pandemic hit, everybody had to shift. So there were a lot of gaps in the things that people used to do every day that they couldn't do as soon as the pandemic hit. And what happened then is organizations were scrambling about how do we fill this dead time? How do we fill the downtime, the areas where people used to do stuff they can't do now? And I think that's one message that the Pluralsight carried all the way through the pandemic, is to help agencies use the downtime to help reskill their employees. And one of the things we like to talk about is continuous learning. It's a very big buzzword at the moment. I'd like to take that one step further and say, actually, what we should be looking towards is continuous reskilling, because in essence, what's happening is if you look at all the emerging technologies, they're not so much emerging, but more converging. There's an awful lot of convergence within technologies. So, for example, we had DevOps, but we always had developers and we always had operations. Then we had DevOps, then we have DevSecOps. Look at things like RPA. Essentially, what's happening is as technology accelerates, it's converging. Okay. So I think one of the things that really changed people, and one of the things that we were very happy to do, is we were able to help people understand that, the organizations understand that, and actually prepare their missions for what's next. Because obviously one of the challenges for that is if you're not looking for convergence down the road, you need a methodology where you can say, okay, we need to take these people with these skills, and now they need these skills as well. So I think that's one of the biggest things I've seen about the pandemic is people have actually understood that there were these areas that they could actually use to improve productivity. And as I always keep saying, you know, learning and gaining knowledge is the ultimate productivity hack. If your people are learning, they're naturally becoming more productive and more effective at the same time. Everybody wins. The people that are learning win, and the organizations that they're working in within win as well.
Thanks, Tony. And Mitch, how has the shift to telework, do you think, given the opportunity to reskill the federal workforce?
Yeah, thanks, Kirsten. It's a great question and great thoughts from Tony and others. I think that a colleague put it really well to me that recently that COVID-19 is the best accident that's ever happened to change management. And he was being sarcastic, but there's a lot of truth in that. I think that agencies like the IRS were relatively prepared in terms of having the maybe the appropriate infrastructure architecture to be able to push the workforce into a telework or more predominantly remote environment. But kind of as far as culturally and emotionally, was everybody prepared for something like this? Not exactly, and I don't know if anybody could have been fully prepared for it. But I do think that it has highlighted or exacerbated some of the challenges related to that in terms of organizational culture, and then even some of the related policies related to maybe IT security, or even just testing or evaluating and deploying new technologies or tools that we don't currently have. But then also it has kind of, I think, humanized the workforce a little bit, if you will, kind of thinking about the people side of change, and just the great examples that Brian was mentioning. Just we're all human. We have our own things in our personal lives with our families and things happening. So I do appreciate the IRS's leadership's commitment to that, and making sure that our workforce feels supported, and that people have a little bit more empathy and flexibility as we all kind of figure this out. So that being said, the IRS still had a incredible amount of responsibility, kind of by maintaining the normal tax administration duties, but then also playing a major role with some of those stimulus packages and the economic impact payments, and partnering with the Bureau of Fiscal Service to actually distribute that money and get the critical funding in the hands of taxpayers and citizens that needed it when they needed it most, when they're in desperate need of a lifeline. So managing that while also trying to make sure that we're innovating and kind of thinking not only about the current situation, but also what are the future needs of our agency? What's the future needs of not only taxpayers, but our employees, to make sure that they're enabled and equipped to do their jobs better. So certainly a continuous learning opportunity, and great point that Tony made about focusing on continue to reskill our workforce. So a lot of good stuff in there related to technology and culture. So thanks for the question, Kirsten.
Yeah, definitely. And we're going to jump to challenges in a moment too, but just sticking with opportunities for a couple more minutes. John, what emerging technologies have you seen help with this reskilling process, if you've seen any?
Brian hit it on the heart for what goes on in GSA. So I don't need to address what Brian did. Just ditto to all the tools and sets and that environment. GSA was prepared. I just did want to focus on, since one of our programs is focusing on accessibility for those with disabilities. This has been a challenge for virtual meetings. It brought out and highlighted challenges that already existed. But we have an administration keenly now focused on diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. Well, that's new. It's not new. Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act's been the law for 20 years, and we've been working with agencies to make digital accessibility reality. But just focusing on these platforms in general, the lessons learned are, you have to plan. When you have a meeting such as the one we're in here, you have to know who's going to need accommodations as part of your registration process. How do you find out who, you need to do that, and know that each one of these platforms, be it Zoom, Google Meet, GoToMeeting, WebEx, et cetera, they all operate a little differently. They all have, a client version versus a web browser experience. They all have a meeting versus a webinar. When do you want everyone in the meeting? When do you want everyone's cameras on? When do you want people's cameras off? I've been in several international meetings, and it's been fascinating with people seeing inside homes in Tokyo, in Switzerland, in Africa, and Canada all at the same time. I've really enjoyed that. I thought it was just really interesting to see the different architectures in play. But so know what you're doing, know who you want to have on there. But for those with hearing impairments, you got to plan for ASL. You got to plan for closed captioning, and every tool works a little bit differently. The current, example, the one we're using here, the Zoom for Government product, the FedRAMP version does not include captioning. They're working on it, but you have to then plan some alternative. And so when you want to have those following in someone doing American Sign Language, you then need to have, you don't want everyone's windows on because you want the people to be able to see the captioner, et cetera. So all these things are important, but it still comes down to meeting etiquette. And Brian touched on this. How you work as a team remotely is quite important, but you still have rule of order of, who's speaking. How do you know someone's waiting for speaking? So you use the fun little hand features here in Zoom, but you need to know that option's not available for people coming in from the web browser. That's only for the downloaded client. Things like that. You need to be able to ensure that everyone gets to participate in the meeting, and that's difficult remotely. But then you also have those that are extreme multitaskers who the temptation to be working on other stuff while in this meeting is even more apparent. And I put myself in that category. And so all these things about how you actually work is a new challenge. Working with those with different disabilities, whether it's sight, which means are the slides you show and stuff, are they able to be read by a screen reader on the fly? Sometimes they work in these products, sometimes they don't. Sometimes if you're running these projects through a VPN versus not makes a difference. You want to have captioning, you want to be able to have interpreters in there. So at the end of the day, if we're going to push for accessibility, accessibility includes those who otherwise aren't included. That increases the diversity and actually leads towards some state of equity. And so if we're trying to build these things, it's time to remember those in all these meetings. And so bottom line is we're building a knowledge bank of how to do this, and we're making that available to everyone.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So a question focused a little bit more on challenges, Alicia. I'm going to turn over to you. What are some of the bigger technology concerns that you have seen during the pandemic as it relates to remote work? And was getting people tuned into the technology difficult or easier than expected?
So one, I do want to mention that Mitch stole my thunder about we were prepared, but we didn't even know we were prepared. So everyone had laptops and they were used to their 2 monitors and commuting into work 1 hour each way. So that's 2 hours on top of their work schedule. But some of the challenges that we ran into were people who weren't familiar with using, let's say, our help desk application ServiceNow to report a problem. They were used to calling our IT support help desk and having someone come up to their space and fix their problem. Well, now you're remote. No one's going to come to your home. So you have to work on the phone with them or allow them access to your desktop or laptop to help solve the problem. So that was one thing we ran into. People were not familiar with working with the technology that we actually had in our laptops. Also, people ran into, I have my small laptop, where are my monitors? When we left the office, we weren't able to take our 2 big 27-inch monitors. Not that they couldn't see, but it was a comfort level. They wanted them. So we had tons of requests for additional monitors for people across the department, and prepared for that because we had them in the office. We have requests for people to, can I go into the office and take my monitors off my desk? No, you can't. You can't do that. So there was a little shift where we realized that we were prepared to keep work going, but we did have to kind of retrain people on their thought processes where you're not allowed into the building right now. We're in a pandemic, stay at home. If you'd like, you can get a HDMI cord connected to your television, but after a couple of weeks went by, we were able to get teleworking packages. So we did not 2 monitors, but 1 monitor and a docking station to help the people at the DHS headquarters, so that it was a little bit more comfortable for them to get the work done. But luckily, work never stopped. People continued. One of the challenges we found, and kind of piggybacking on what Tony said, we had to reskill some personnel. What they were doing in the office was changing now that we were moving to the cloud environment. So looking at the training that they've done in Pluralsight, we can see where they need to grow or kind of shift. And so we've taken those 2 hours that people were using commuting to have training sessions. In the office, we would have a stand down day to help people learn and grow. Now we're taking maybe 30 minutes, maximum an hour, to encourage people to take different training to help them get a certification in Microsoft Azure and understanding Amazon better, the Amazon cloud better.
Thank you. Great answers. And Charles, since you support underlying services at SBA, was it a challenge that other agencies had to scale as well in order to support telework needs? And what were some of those challenges that you ran into?
Yep. The one thing I'd like to maybe add or follow up on is based on comments from Tony and Alicia on reskilling. One thing that the OCIO office at SBA is looking at right now, not only is how do we reskill and upscale our team, right, to be able to better support our customers. I think there is also emphasis on looking at alignment of the organization. So, focusing on a service-oriented architecture, meaning that, or a product-oriented organization, meaning that we realign ourselves to directly support the products that SBA offers, I think is something that definitely we're looking at in addition to reskilling. In addition, I think in terms of working with other organizations, I don't have a lot of insight into that based on my position, but I believe that the systems that we had to work with, the standards for exchanging information about loan applicants and so forth, those were, I think, shifted to the cloud. So before we had a lot of on-premise solutions, but I know that we had to shift to the cloud in order to scale, and that made I think everyone's jobs much easier.
Thank you. And Brian, sticking with challenges for just another moment, in our prep call, we discussed the emotional side of this for everyone involved. How do you think that this whole situation has affected people? How do you think the new administration is pushing for, how the new administration, they're pushing for digital transformation? How do you think that will affect the people that you work and lead as well?
Wow, that's a tough one, right? I think as far as challenges, there's as many challenges there as there are opportunities. I think it's been wonderful hearing everyone's answers, and I think me describing that work-life balance, and Mitch was describing, he used the word empathy. So I think that empathy and compassion, and that's between workers. I think that's between kind of the leaders and the led. So everyone in the organization, I think that's probably the biggest opportunity there is just the humanization. Mitch, I think you described it. Alicia may have used that as well. Because I think the biggest challenge is the uncertainty. Everyone's getting vaccinated. All of our services are changing. We're getting new, what would you call it? Demand signals, right? From our users. We're getting asked to do stuff we weren't doing before. And that goes not just for 18F, but our partners. And I think what I'm hearing from everyone else. So I think that underlying like flagstone challenge is the uncertainty, and how ready are we to manage and lead through that? We've got a lot more to do. Diversity, inclusion, equity, and racial justice is not going to improve overnight. Climate change isn't going to go away overnight. COVID response, that's hopefully it gets better, but it's also not going to go away overnight. And so I think it's all of that uncertainty of how to manage and lead through that. The answer, I think, tends to be just empathy, compassion. I think some of those cultural things from the tech industry, 18F, but also USDS, and many of the government organizations are starting to adopt those management methods. It's less top down, it's more flat, more servant leadership. How can I help you today? Kind of thinking, kind of a rambling answer, but I think that's the challenge. I think that's the opportunity. And I think that's the way through all of it is some of those techniques to manage uncertainty better. And the agile methods and the agile culture that kind of goes along with it. It's a proven method for managing uncertainty in a healthy, productive way. So anyway.
Yeah, no, I think that was a great answer. There's a lot that needs to go into it. So thank you for sharing that. And sticking with challenges for just another minute, John, I am going to turn this audience question over to you because it kind of aligned with what I was going to ask you next anyway. So my question was around bigger technology concerns that you've seen during this pandemic, specifically as it relates to remote work. Was getting people tuned into the technology difficult, or was it easy? But Shirley Collins asks, have you noticed people not wanting to have their face displayed online during an event? Her example is that she had to interview a person who refused to show her likeness for security reasons. And I know in the prep call, you talked about not being camera ready, not having your makeup on. So what would you respond to Shirley for that?
First of all, I don't need my makeup on, but that's all right. No, I think and Brian was talking about, the culture will change of what work is. There is, we're going into people's homes. And are you willing? Yes, you give up a little bit of privacy to do that. And well, no one's expected to be in full on-stage business attire. There is, there are some expectations. And so it's a delicate balance of work life. And if you have, whatever around you, and I've got lighting issues here today. It's too bright outside, so I'm looking dark in this camera, and I need to fix that. But there's a certain level of acceptance of how you're prepared. Your own mindset. Okay, I am now at work. I am not at home, and everyone has their own way of handling the visual clues for that. Some people go out and take a walk to simulate their, walk around the block instead of a commute. Some people I've heard even go take a drive in the morning, something to make that difference. Some people turn their garden shed into an office. And so if this is going to become more permanent, and I've already seen that everyone has upgraded, I've got now, 3 or 4 different monitors set up here that you're not seeing. And, I think, I bought a better chair. People are taking their home setups and improving it to be more professional and more, and let's not forget ergonomics. But there still is that, some people are just bashful and don't want people seeing them on camera. The use of the backgrounds are helpful. The use of the Google Meet has a blurred, you can blur your background if you want to. I know on that one, I don't know about the other products and stuff, but so it is, people have to get used to. And in my mind, that's part of, pre-COVID, the telework agreement. If you want to telework, this is what you have to do. You have to have, you have to have equipment. You have to be willing to be part of your meetings. Because I do believe the face-to-face value is important for people. You're more forced to be in the meeting, and there's still that eye-to-eye contact for most people who can see, and that's valuable.
Yep, absolutely. Lots to be said about habits and routines during this time. Unfortunately, Alicia had to drop, so if anyone's wondering where she went, she had to say goodbye a little bit early, but it was great having her on. So next, I would like to put up our third and final poll question for this panel. In your opinion, how important is emerging technologies to the future of the federal workforce? Very important, important, moderate, you do not know, or it is not important. So go ahead and answer that. And we're going to discuss some things surrounding the future, the vision of the federal workforce, and some things we'd like to see also. So I'm going to turn it over to Tony, please. Tony, what do you believe needs to be incorporated into the culture of the workforce?
Oh, that's a loaded question. Okay, so there's a whole culture of learning discussion to be had, which is really, really important. And that a culture of learning is the concept of a top-down approach to learning. That is giving people permission to learn. So if indeed all organizations are technology organizations, like we're constantly told in the media, then all organizations have to be, by their very nature, learning organizations, because how can you keep up with technology if you're not continually learning? So, I mean, to put that into perspective as well, I think there's a lot of confusion about what learning is in terms of the skills that we need for the future. So Ray Kurzweil, if you're not familiar with him, was described by Bill Gates as one of the best predictors of future technologies that are out there today. And if you think about it, we've seen more change and then more innovation in the last 100 years than in the previous 1,000 years. Okay, so think about that for a second. And all of the trending information, all of the data shows us that curve is continually going exponential. So Ray Kurzweil says that we're going to see the equivalent of 20,000 years worth of technological change in the next 100 years. So when you think about that, that's a mind-boggling statistic right there. So you have to start looking at two sets of skills. You have to look at skills as being divided into durable skills and perishable skills, okay? And our technology skills that we're learning are somewhat perishable. I think a report I read recently said, if you learn a new technology, the half-life of that technology is like 2.5 to 4 years. So in essence, we're continually reskilling, okay? So this is really important, whereas you've got durable skills, durable skills are the things that allow us to solve unknown problems. And I was very excited to see a representative from NASA on the call today doing the keynote. That was fantastic, because durable skills are things like resiliency, adaptability, curiosity, ability to learn. So all of these things are really important. They're much, much more durable. And what we're seeing is with all of this change, we have to assume that durable skills are far more important, because every couple of years, every few years, the knowledge that we've already learned, we have to adapt and we have to change that again. Think about all of the people in the audience, I'm sure, that at some point created a web page with HTML when HTML was kicking around. Those skills that you had there won't get you anywhere close to doing anything in the world of web development these days. It's so far gone, and yet it isn't when you think back. So to kind of round my point off, I think we need to be looking more at durable skills, and we need to be looking at things like having the ability to lead to learning. We need to be able to say, these people that we're hiring in our workforce in 5 years are probably going to be doing something significantly different than they're doing today. And we need to have a framework in place where we can understand their proficiency and their knowledge and their ability to learn. We need to understand how we can change or improve their adaptability. But more importantly, we have to create a wide knowledge framework. So one of the things that we offer to all of our organizations is this library of 8,000 plus technical courses. And what that does is that gives the ability for the InfoSec people to go, okay, we're bringing artificial intelligence into InfoSec now. So we need to cross skill in that. So we need to grab this knowledge from over there. Our cloud people, now we're doing analytics in cloud. So we need to grab our analytics information over there and bring it to our cloud people. So that's what we're really seeing is I think we need to focus more on durability, durable skills, instead of creating these laundry lists of specializations that we put out there when we try and get people to work. And we need to understand that learning is going to be a skill just like anything else, and it has to be something that we get really good at.
I love that. That's great. Thank you. And Mitch, this one's directed towards you, so I'm going to go ahead and ask you. With your move to a fully digital organization, do you still see a need for the human element to confirm decisions made by AI ML? If yes, are you looking for the human confirmation to remain remote?
Great question, right? Loaded question with no easy answer. So I think that we joke a lot in our office that we don't have technology problems, we have people problems. So I say that sarcastically, but it really kind of hits on, thinking about culture and thinking about kind of policies and processes related to how we do our business. And so we can't just throw a new technology or a bucket of money in a problem and expect it to go away or expect it to be solved, right? So that being said, I think that and Tony made some incredible points. Just that we're at this new stage or era in the world where we have incredible advancements and accessibility of cheap computing power. And so I think that it'd be foolish for the government or any organization to ignore the potential benefits of tools like AI and automation and machine learning and natural language processing and things like that. So I think it's us at the IRS and our digitalization team, we're really focused on intelligently exploring and integrating those tools and technologies where appropriate to help us drive efficiencies, improve experiences, and drive better outcomes for taxpayers and employees. So I think that for there's going to be certain types of processes where they're perfect candidates for something like robotic process automation or more cognitive automation. Those rules-based processes, well-documented processes. The IRS has a lot of those. And I think that it's important to think of these tools like AI as digital assistants or digital augmenters. They're not replacing or taking anyone's job away necessarily. They're just there to help shift from low value to high value work, right? The president's management agenda, think about that CAP goal. How can we have our employees focus less on the time consuming manual redundant work, the copying and paste exercising, and instead get a tool to help do that so our employees can focus on the higher value work, the strategic thinking, the critical analysis, the industry engagement, the employee mentoring and coaching, things like that, like you were saying, Kirsten, the decision making, the kind of the human judgment factor, the things that the human mind is better at. So I think it's going to be kind of a mix or a blend, if you will, and these tools are going to be assistants or augmenters. And so I think that we have to try our best to not go all in up front, to try to take an incremental agile approach and test and evaluate things and bite off small manageable chunks, and then we can figure out what's the appropriate type or the appropriate amount of this technology to really integrate into our operations so we can do our jobs better and serve taxpayers better. So great loaded question there. Hopefully that was some helpful insights.
Excellent. Thank you, Mitch. I think that was an excellent answer. So rapid fire round, we are coming to the end of our panel discussion. 30 seconds or less. Future of, what you want to see happen in the government, and or leave our audience with something you just want to wow them with. No pressure. Charles, over to you.
Yes. Yeah, I definitely see that our agency is going to leverage AI, machine learning. First, building on the foundation, right? The first step would be to capture some of the institutional knowledge, as there are a lot of, we have workforce, we have retirements, we have folks that are leaving the organization to other agencies. Having a way to capture institutional knowledge is one that I think is best served using things like artificial intelligence and chatbots, so that information can be conserved, reserved, preserved, and allow others, right, who join the agency later on to kind of learn from that.
Thank you, Charles. And John.
Don't be afraid. It's a new world, and lots of good things will happen. And the more people we get to engage, the better we'll be. Just don't live in the past.
Love it. Thank you. And Brian?
Yeah, what Tony and Mitch was what they were talking about really resonated with me. I think the importance of a learning organization. I think the culture and the processes in place, like guild structures for employees to constantly learn from one another. But right along with that is leadership's active involvement and comfort with uncertainty, that what the people will be doing, the tools that they'll be using will constantly evolve. And so they need to be really comfortable with that, with all that uncertainty, while simultaneously the leadership is ensuring psychological safety as employees are setting up minimum viable products, failing fast and failing often. And really just that interesting juxtaposition. Amazon calls it the blind alleys, right? But failure as a part of learning and being very comfortable with all of that, because that's where innovation comes from, and leadership's role in it, but then some of the organizational processes for employees just learning from one another, and a culture of folks actively sharing what they've tried, what's failed, what's worked, and being a part of that. And we've seen that at ATNF, just the opportunities with partners. So that's my thoughts.
Amazing. And speaking of learning, Tony, time to wow us.
Yeah, that was interesting actually, because as Brian's going through his list of points, I'm sitting here crossing off the points I was going to make. So I guess one of the things that's important to understand is that learning isn't something that only happens at the office. I think that one of the coolest things in the world is curiosity, and often it's schooled out of us at a very early age. Sometimes, if we're really lucky as adults, we can work to regain that sense of wonderment and excitement because we're learning something new and something cool. So I think what I would say is, at the end of every week, ask yourself, what did I learn this week, as opposed to what did I produce this week, or as well as what did I produce this week? Because you have to remember that all learning compounds, it all builds on each other. So every moment that you spend learning, whether it's for business or for yourself, makes you more promotable, more hireable, more adaptable, and creates stronger and far more adaptable organizations. Go learn.
Love it. Awesome. And Mitch, wrap us up.
Thanks, Kirsten. Yeah, great. So many great thoughts from fellow panelists. A couple thoughts is I'm optimistic about the future. I think focusing on employee experiences and citizen experiences and using digital tools to help us reach those underserved communities is going to be really important. So I think at the IRS, expanding digital services and providing more of those omni-channel experiences are going to help us with two things. The first, it's going to help us amplify our ability to reach taxpayers with the information that they need, right? And then the second is really using digital tools to help meet taxpayers and employees where they are. And that means meet them at the time, in the language, and in the method that they prefer. So I think that expanding digital options and services is really going to make this more attainable, and the government has to meet this need.
Awesome. Great way to end it. Thank you guys so much. This hour flew by and we covered so much territory. I really appreciate you guys joining this panel discussion today. Up next, we will be hearing from our last Tech Talk of the day. This time we'll be hearing from Brian Linder, the emerging threats expert and evangelist over at Checkpoint. Brian, over to you.
Thanks, Kirsten. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
All right. Good morning, everybody. This is Brian Linder, as Kirsten said. I'm part of the Workforce Security War Room over here at Checkpoint, part of the Office of the CTO. Checkpoint, if you don't know, is a global $2 billion global cybersecurity leader with an emphasis on emerging cyber threats. So I have some bad news for my 15 minutes here. I'm not going to have any slides. Now, I know that's very disappointing, but in continuing with the panelist theme, I think I'm just going to talk to you. I'll tell you some stories. I'm going to relate back to you some really recent news in terms of what happened last week with the pipeline, how TIC 3.0 is impacting federal agencies, and maybe at the end, a quick prescription for dealing with some modern threats. So I think that's the way I'll go, and I know how disappointing that must be to have no slides, but bear with me here. First of all, we have key priorities around obviously aligning to something called TIC 3.0, that is courtesy of the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. And basically, this is an initiative, of course, that is designed to increase our posture in cybersecurity across the entire federal government. I'd like to focus your attention just a bit on remote users, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the plight of the remote user, the cyber challenges facing them in all of our agencies. And of course, there's recently as December of 2020, and it's an evolving document, is a remote user use case for TIC 3.0. So I encourage you to take a look at that. Now, I'm going to boil that way down into a 12-minute discussion, but I definitely encourage you to look at it. It talks about some of the challenges we face, and of course, as we've gone into the pandemic and through it and now back out of it, what's happened. I'm going to talk a little bit about the psychology of the remote user and how it has the potential to be a threat to your environments, and then I'll talk about the pipeline, which I know is on everybody's mind. First of all, in the macro sense, I'll start there. Obviously, we all need to stay open for business no matter what. We are 24/7 operations. We are protecting our most sensitive data. And of course, cyber espionage is rampant in the public sector. We see it a lot in SLED and of course in the Fed environment as well. 79% of all breaches involve external actors, so people coming after the organizations. And then we have a bigger challenge, I think, that I'm going to talk more about today, which is a just simple error by insiders. The people in your agencies making mistakes that account for up to 30% of breaches, which I think also includes the pipeline breach of last week. And I think most seriously, the lack of expertise and resources to handle the incredibly complex threat landscape of cybersecurity threats that are out there. There aren't enough people in the workforce, period. We have a lot of movement in the workforce, and federal agencies are often competing with private sector to get the best people, if you can even afford them. So it creates kind of an interesting perfect storm that I'm going to call the positive feedback loop. And you'll hear me talk about bad actors as almost as an enterprising bunch who are out to make money and capitalize on what's going on in society. And this is actually happening repeatedly in, out, and through the pandemic. And that is the following. First of all, many organizations are carrying some kind of cyber insurance these days. Most organizations lack the funds to put up the right levels of defense or hire the right people. As I said, private sector is beating the government sector for the best people in cyber. And of course, all of your services are critical to operating the federal government. All this creates a really interesting thing I call the positive feedback loop for bad actors. They see this as a huge, huge opportunity. So in the macro sense, there's a huge threat surface out there to be exploited. We don't have enough people to put in place with the right skill sets. It's impossible to manage all the technology that's out there. That is the macro side of it. Now, let me go into perhaps the more interesting side of it that I call the micro side of it. And now I'm going to point a finger at you, and I'm going to point a finger at myself, and I'm going to point a finger at everybody that we work with, and not with any malice or bad intent, but we are all representing the weakest link in cybersecurity. I think it was brought up previously I was joining the end of the panel discussion. I think I caught a little bit of this. We are all the weakest link, and it's not necessarily out of malice. First of all, we are in one of the greatest periods of workforce distraction in the history of our country. And this focuses specifically on federal workers. We have a variety, a menu of something I call the fatigues. The transition to remote work 100% for most people, and now into it, through it, and now maybe even coming out of it. And somebody referenced the fact that we will remain in a hybrid environment. I completely agree with that. So let me outline a couple of the fatigues. First one is Zoom fatigue, which is ironic since we're all in a Zoom right now. Pandemic fatigue, vaccine fatigue, home office fatigue, pet fatigue, you name it. And one that has gotten lost is breach fatigue. We hear about these massive breaches. We, of course, were reminded as last week one came to the forefront that affected probably you quite directly if you're in the DC, Virginia area because of the way the pipeline was shut down. But breach fatigue is one that's been going on well before the pandemic and right on through it. Now, all of these fatigues add up to a distracted workforce that creates a prime business opportunity for bad actors, and ransomware, which you've probably heard about if you've been tuned into any of the news, and has eclipsed all discussions. Previous to that, you'd probably heard about the largest cyber exposure in the history of the country around what's known as sunburst or solar winds. Huge concern and definite breaches in the federal government. Last week, we had the entire Colonial Pipeline brought down by a ransomware attack. I'd like to drill into that a bit. Now, the Washington Post reports that 26 government agencies have been hit with ransomware just since the beginning of the year, which is amazing. Now, the wider public, yourself, myself, and the rest of the country, and even the rest of the world, got an unwanted glimpse, I'll call it, into what we'll call the Wild West of ransomware. And a cyber attack crippled the Colonial Pipeline, shut it down, attacked the IT side of the house. We don't know if it ever made it over to the OT side, the operational technology that controls the valves that funnel gas around. But as out of an abundance of caution, at least it was claimed, they shut the pipeline down, which impacted everybody. Now, the issue here, of course, is that that these attacks not only aren't going away, but they're getting more and more sophisticated. So allow me to take 2 minutes to tell you about the evolution of sophistication of ransomware. If you don't know what ransomware is, and most people probably do, if nothing else from the news last week, but I'll explain it to you. Basically, it's a matter of an attack being launched. Let's take something simple against a PC or a laptop you own. That device becomes completely encrypted, and in order for you to de-encrypt that device and get your data back, you have to pay a ransom, encrypt it in a Bitcoin or a cryptocurrency. Now, that's a real simple example. This has evolved, of course, at the enterprise level, where an agency or an enterprise or a state or a local government, even the federal government agencies, would be attacked as an enterprise. In this case, the Colonial Pipelines information technology was attacked. All of their servers, whether they be cloud or in data center, were then encrypted. And a huge ransom, I put that in quotes because what is a huge ransom? In some cases, the cost of the ransom far, far less than the cost of having to recover that data was demanded and allegedly eventually paid. And we could speculate who paid it and how it got paid. There was cyber insurance involved. There was federal government was involved. Biden administration was involved. It was alleged it was a Russian organization that did it. So there's a lot of implications there. But I want to tell you how this kind of ransomware attack has emerged and what makes it most disturbing. And then I'll wrap my discussion up with a prescriptive. So in the original ransomware model, it was simply encrypt and demand payment, and you pay, and then it's allegedly your data is decrypted in most cases. Sometimes not, but in most cases. We see an evolution to now something called double extortion with ransomware. The first thing that the attacker does is encrypt your data. The second thing they do, by the way, before they encrypt it, they steal your customer data or your databases. They hold them and they threaten to disclose that data to the outside world. And they demand a double extortion, which means possibly even paying 2 ransoms or doubling the ransoms to stop the leakage of that data and also to de-encrypt your machines. Now, in the case of the pipeline, approximately 100 gig of data, it wasn't exactly that because some of it got stopped, was exposed and potentially going to be leaked by these bad actors. Now you're saying, well, what was in the 100 gig of data? Well, it's believed that possibly plans for the pipeline itself, including how the valves were interconnected and possibly confidential data around how it was architected, could have been leaked, in which case another bad actor could have bought that on the dark web and potentially exploited it to actually attack the pipeline infrastructure itself. Very scary. Now we see another evolution where the bad actors say, wait a minute, I can build on that. Let me threaten a denial of service attack against the enterprise. Let me put a robocall to all that enterprise's customers. Let me steal a customer list and start calling those customers and telling them that their data's been leaked or that, some other malformed phone call. And we even see, and this is the craziest thing, we even see the threat in the private sector, less so in the Fed sector, but of informing stockholders to sell the stock short because they're about to be disclosed that there was a breach. So we have seen these bad actors evolve quite significantly. It's amazing to see. I have like 2 minutes left, and I'm going to give you a quick prescriptive, okay? The first prescriptive we recommend based on watching through our war room for the better part of a year, first of all, by far and away, is in organizations like yourselves where you have many, many, many security controls in place in an effort to align, obviously, to TIC 3.0, whether it be for remote users or cloud or whatever, internet access, is to reduce the number of platforms you're using. Look for solutions where you have an opportunity to reduce and consolidate your infrastructure. So no matter what the skill level of people operating them are, you have fewer interfaces, fewer windows, fewer things to learn. Number 2, acknowledge the lack of experts. Acknowledge the extreme competition you've got. Trust a partner to develop all the artificial intelligence and machine learning around a planet's worth of threat intelligence. Don't try to reinvent that yourself. Acknowledge the fact that you do not have enough skilled people to do this work, and make sure you're depending on a single platform that consolidates all that expertise. You should be aware of things like extended detection and response, XDR, and threat hunting so that you have the greatest visibility. So keep your eyes open for that. Read up on that. Acknowledge the blind spot of your mobile devices. The TIC guidance talks about government issued devices, but also the challenge of bring your own devices. So make sure you're familiar with the difference there, and make sure you acknowledge that mobile devices often in high remote work environments represent a huge blind spot. And finally, educate your distracted humans. I mean me, and I mean you, and I mean all of us. I'm not limiting this to just either lay people or whoever. I'm saying everyone, including experts. Most ransomware operators use well-researched and high-value targeted spear phishing emails to attack their victims. And these emails are so sophisticated, they appear to be from people that you know. They may even trick the most diligent employee. It's not done out of malice, but people tend to be subject to social engineering, and it does happen. So those are a couple of the prescriptives. I'll share the prescriptive list through the event organizers here, so you can have a copy of it. But in that is, and that's about my 15 minutes. If there are any questions, I'm happy to take them live here.
That was great, Brian. I am here for the no slide presentation. Thank you for sharing that with us. Awesome. Up next is our second panel of the day, which I also have the pleasure of moderating. And just as a reminder, please put any questions you have in the Q&A box and we will answer them throughout the panel. Additionally, don't forget again to answer the poll questions. This will ensure that you are eligible to receive CPE credits today. And now I'd like to go ahead and introduce our panelists. So if our panelists could please come on camera and unmute yourself. Actually, we have one panelist who will not be on, possibly two panelists who will not be on camera today. So I guess we'll see who those are momentarily. But I think the first one is Raven. So Raven Manuel is the senior application developer and architect. She's a DevOps engineer at the National Museum of African American History and Culture. And Raven, am I correct that you will not be on camera today?
Yes, ma'am. And I do apologize for that.
All
I'm
good.
having
All good. If you
problems.
want to just jump in anytime, feel free to use the hand raise thing if you need to get my attention or whatnot.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. And Christopher Christ, Chief Cyber Operations and Development Command Control Communications and Cyber Systems at U.S. Transportation Command within the U.S. Department of Defense. We also have Ian Anderson, Lead DevOps Engineer at the U.S. Navy. Rajiv Dolis, Senior Information Technology Executive at the Department of Transportation. From our industry side, we have David Ray, the Public Sector Chief Technology Officer at Micro Focus Government Solutions, Channel and Alliances. And then we also have Edmund Kuko, the NTWC Atlantic and NIWC Pacific DevSecOps Lead at the US Navy. And Edmund, I believe you will not be on camera either, is that correct? Oh, I think we lost Edmund. Okay, hopefully he'll be joining us. I already introduced him if that is the case. Alyssa, could you please go ahead and pop up the poll question that I requested prior to this? I just want to kind of go ahead and get that one knocked out. For our audience, where is your agency in the implementation of DevSecOps? We have been doing this for years. We just started, huh? Or tell me more. So with that, speaking of tell me more, I would like each of our panelists to please tell me a little bit more about any work you're doing relevant to the topic, anything that you'd like to share with our audience up front so we can knock that out. And if we could hear from Raven first, please.
Thank you, ma'am. And thank you for having me on the panel. It's always a pleasure. We are, we're like in the middle of our journey here because we have one of the challenges that I face. Well, there's two big challenges that I face. One is that our teams, our development teams, are contractor based and are not from like the same organization. It's just for the museum itself. We contract work based off of exhibitions, and so each exhibition is different and also digital products. So that means that we have all these different teams with different skill sets. So trying to come up with a DevOps strategy to cover all of these disparate teams has been a challenge for me. And so my focus now is not really on the tools anymore, which is where I started. It's more on not just the strategy, but also on the knowledge domains that are rolled up with DevOps, such as governance and security and automation and stuff. So I have like these components all broken down, and I think about them and try to get each of the teams to be compliant with maybe some standards or anything that, because there's not that many standards out there for a lot of these things. And so to be able to say, hey, what is it that your team is doing as far as performance and efficiencies in getting the code from one point to point B. And so that's one of the challenges. And another challenge that we're facing, which is really directly related to this topic, is how do we do application security, meaning tracing, observability, and trying to get secure code, whether it be open source libraries or just libraries that are part of an open source CMS. And so that's another little minor headache that I'm trying to deal with.
Thanks, Raven. And Christopher, I'd love to hear from you next.
Yeah, absolutely. So here at U.S. Transportation Command, for the last couple of years, so my team was actually stood up about 2 years ago. And within that 2 years, we've had the whole mindset of build it and they will come. So we're trying to look at DevOps as a service and creating all these DevOps services within an enterprise environment, and then assigning service owners to those services. So within my team, we have those service owners, they maintain those services, those tools around that. We educate people on those, we onboard people to the environment, and they essentially use our pipeline. So we have, programs, developers, contracts with roughly, I think, 77 programs that are all coming to us and using our pipeline and using our container orchestration management and all of that. That's what we have in our current environment. And for the future, we're working towards a new environment in which we're implementing from the ground up methods that we think are correct based on lessons learned. We're looking to implement a GitOps methodology, as well as consolidate a lot of the tools that we use as a part of the pipeline, because it is a challenge to maintain those tools we found. And sometimes it's taken longer than we would hope. So that's primarily what we've been doing and where we're going.
Great, thank you. And over to Ian.
Yeah, so I work at Naval Surface Warfare Center Dahlgren down at their Dam Neck Annex in Virginia Beach. So some of the things I've been helping out with, one of the unique things and kind of fortunate things for us that came from this COVID-19 pandemic is it also coincided with the end of our 5-year strategic plan. So we had to create the next 5 years and what we wanted to focus on and really upgrade, implement into policy. So one of the things that we saw was, kind of this, lack of cohesion between all of our groups and departments when it came to software development. And we're a really heavy software development organization. So we had the unique opportunity to first, actually start putting this into policy and, moving forward and saying, we're going to do this. We're not going to, go back to the old methods. One of the interesting things with it, though, is we're a working capital fund. So the money provided to us by the government is only to keep the lights on. Our actual money comes from the projects we bring in. So it's really hard to get groups to work together, and even just the knowledge between the groups on, the various best practices and what they want to implement is very different and very siloed. So there's a lot of, these hurdles that we're looking at, so I'm helping out with a kind of enterprise-wide software factory hybrid cloud strategy. Fortunately, Naval Surface Warfare Dahlgren got into the Microsoft Azure and AWS GovClouds early. So we have that at our disposal. So, the challenges with doing this that we're really facing right now is we have teams that are, asking questions like, what is Git? What is, Kubernetes and all these things. And then we have, the other teams that are actually utilizing services in the cloud, and they're doing all the, best practices, and they have a lot of the tools. So when we go to implement this, in the start of our journey right now, how do we not hinder those teams that are already there, but how do we help those teams that are, coming up and need those tools and best practices?
Thanks, Ian. And over to you, Raj.
Hey, Kirsten, how you doing? Thanks for having me here. I'm Raj Dolos. I'm the Chief Technology Officer for National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, which is a bureau on a node under Department of Transportation. I've been there since September of last year. So talking about pandemic, I was completely virtually onboarded I've been working virtually ever since then, and it's an amazing experience. I work with my peers and my employees completely virtually. I haven't stepped a foot in my office yet. So it's a completely new experience for all of us. Having said that, well, NHTSA, as the acronym stands, it has already migrated towards agile software development practices. We are already using a fairly robust CI/CD pipeline using Jenkins-based, cloud-based environment. My goal really is to marry the sec portion in the DevSecOps in our DevOps pipeline, where we have a robust way of developing the new projects that are under development using the CI/CD pipeline. We build using Jenkins, and the deployment is one area where we are going to emphasize on. When you talk about CI/CD, there's continuous integration and there's continuous delivery or continuous deployment, either one of the other CDs. The last D part is where we're emphasizing a lot right now. We want to make sure that the continuous delivery or continuous deployment truly is embraced by all project teams in a very consistent way. And then going back to bringing the security, shifting it further left with the development team, the emphasis is there to ensure that my CISO and my security team are working hand in hand and very collaboratively with the software development teams that we have, and ensuring that the silos that may exist, unfortunately, they don't exist as much as they have existed in some other organizations. Our silos are fairly diffused already to begin with, but the emphasis is still to embrace good collaboration, good team working effort in making sure that security is not just a checkpoint, a check mark, but rather it's continuously observed, evaluated, and remediated during software development. So it's a journey that we're on. We have a very diverse group of software developers right now. They are located in different areas, obviously, because of the pandemic. No one is in the office itself. And the emphasis is going to be, as we go forward, the emphasis is going to be ensuring that we have a very good, very robust, centralized governance area environment where all teams can use, chip in, as well as improve the CI/CD, the DevSecOps platform for us.
Thanks, Raj. And over to you, David.
Sure, thank you, Kristen. For those of you that may not realize, Micro Focus is an industry, software producer. So we actually produce a lot of commercial products that are used for building software factories and DevOps and Agile. So for our effort internally, we wanted to create a better software factory. So we started probably about 4 years ago in consolidating, rationalizing the tools that we were using internally for our product to market development cycle. And we eventually called that our R&D digital software factory. Today, we're scanning anywhere from 10 to 20 million lines of code nightly, and we're releasing about 2,000 patch releases a year across 300 products in our portfolio. We're quite large software producer, one of the world's largest, about 3 billion, with close to 5,000 engineers worldwide. So I echo a lot of the comments that Chris mentioned about promoting the concept of enterprise services from DevOps. We had to shift our local DevOps teams that had excellence in their local teams to adopting, enterprise services for DevOps. And that's actually kind of what Ian, what you mentioned. It's a cultural shift to get people to adopt enterprise services, to get them trained, to get them stood up. So today we have a very large wiki established internally. We have procedures and processes stood up. Being a commercial entity, it was easier for us to mandate compliance with some of these tools. And we rationalized over 200, products down to about a dozen, mainly some of our own products for things like Fortify for software assurance and the performance engineering, performance testing with our load runner tools. we're also leveraging our production monitoring and management tools, our ITOM portfolio, our service management tools, and our SIM, our ArcSight SIM, as part of that process, so we can handle that entire value chain of that's required for producing software. Most recently, we've been very focused on insider threat and supply chain risk within our software builds. It's going to be more prevalent for us now that the executive order was just released. We'll see what happens in the next 6 months, but it's being able to really understand that build process, and we're starting to take more privileges away from developers, like doing local builds, even though they're using enterprise services, using an automation server, setting up tighter zero trust and insider threat modeling over the development communities, so that you only have access to what you need, and really locking down our artifactories for the binaries, APIs, and if and when we use open source in that environment, to make sure it's safe and secure. And that's where we're at today.
Awesome. Thank you, David. And Edmund, I don't know if you heard my spiel earlier, but if there's anything you'd like to share with the audience up front, now would be the time. Can you hear me, Edmund? You are on mute. Oh, he's gone. Okay, well, we'll have to circle back with him later. Raven, jumping into, I want to focus first on emerging tech and strengthening of DevSecOps. So I had a question for you. Could you please explain the autonomy of units at the Smithsonian? How does this affect emerging tech and DevSecOps best practices for our audience who may be unaware?
Sure, thank you. That's actually a cool question, because I'm really proud of where I work, but I would never want to be enterprise IT. The way the Smithsonian is set up is that we have enterprise IT that's represented by the Office of the CIO. Each unit, like the galleries or museums, a zoo, research centers, we are our own little Idaho. So if we have some of us have our own IT department, and we can make our own decisions about how we do software development, application development, and interactives, and any other digital products that we want to make. So we can do pretty much what we want to do. Our unit, my unit, generally tries to be good citizens and work with OCIO and use some of the services the shared services that are offered by our enterprise IT. It gets a little bit tricky because if we have to take code from AWS, because we do use cloud, we have to take it from AWS and then launch it so that the production version is in a data center. There's a little bit of mistrust from about the code based off of the things like David is saying, and same thing with Ian, as far as, you know, the security around it. So we are kind of, we can be really on the edge for ourselves if we were producing and launching anything like anything from production in AWS, but then we kind of get hindered and can't use all the whiz-bangy tools once we get into development. So it kind of gets a little tricky there.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah.
And Chris, I know you alluded to this earlier, but where is your agency in the implementation of DevSecOps, and how has Platform One been an example for you during this improvement period?
Yeah, so, you know, I think it's great what Platform One is doing. I think it's fantastic. And I think that they have a great individual to lead that effort. And so we certainly interact with them pretty often. We've gone down, visited with them, because we don't want to reinvent the wheel. And so, you know, we're pretty, I guess we're a pretty large organization. So it's not so simple to just say, hey, take our programs and, you know, let's run with it. So we have our own enterprise environment where, of course, we're trying to get programs to move forward and modernize. And as Ian mentioned, you know, we have programs from, you know, they're asking questions on what Kubernetes is. You know, they're confused as to, what do you mean I can't get into production? You know, that's not the way it's supposed to be. You're supposed to deploy immutable containers, right? You never touch it again. You know? So, you know, so we're having those conversations, but we also have some programs that are, they're waiting on us. so it's a tough situation to be in sometimes. And so, we generally direct programs to look at Platform One, see what they're doing, because we're pretty much trying to do the same thing. We're doing a few things a little bit differently, but not by far. And I think, honestly, if we've had success in moving some things forward, it's because we've been able to reference the DoD reference design, which Nicholas Shalane, CSO, was a part of. And that's kind of really helped us to get credibility, if you will. Because sometimes, within your organization, people look at you like, yeah, you've been talking about this for a long time and, pie in the sky and all that. But when you have other entities that are also trying to do the same thing, it really helps us to move that forward. So I'm very grateful for Platform One. I think it only helps us to explain why it's important to move this forward.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Slight pause on the questions. Alyssa, if we could please pop up the next poll for our audience. This one should be, in your opinion, how important is emerging technology to strengthening DevSecOps and DevOps within the federal government? Whether you would rank it very important, important, moderate, you don't know, or you don't think it's important, please go ahead and post your answer so that you can receive your CPE credits for today. So next question, I'm going to turn over to Ian. Ian, where are you guys with your digital transformation journey? And then what challenges or benefits with tools have affected this along the way?
Yeah, so we are just starting out within, as a Warfare Center wide within the first year of doing this. And like I said, and what Chris said, the biggest challenge is you have, those groups or those departments that are well ahead of the curve. They are implementing some of these best practices, have some of the latest tools that they're using, CI/CD, all these things. And then you have other groups that really don't know what they need to do in the future, and all this policy coming out from our strategic plan to our software chief engineers, and they say, what are these things? So the interesting thing that we've found is we want to do, like pretty much everybody has said, and David alluded to, is kind of consolidate everything into enterprise services. And what's nice for us is enterprise provided services at the Warfare Center level. A project comes in and there's essentially a tax on the project that goes to the Warfare Center itself to provide services to all of our departments. So being able to provide these DevOps, DevSecOps tools to the programs, as a whole, actually will cut down on their budget. I was just talking with a group, and we were talking about standing up, or a group has, a Atlassian stack with your Jira and Confluence and Bitbucket and these various things. And we said, yeah, we have 500 users. How many do you need? And they were surprised. They said, wow, that's really great, because, we had the, 250 user license and we just needed 2 more. And then we had to bump it up to the, next level, whatever it was. And we only needed 2 more seats. So being able to provide those enterprise tools, helps out in, that journey. For us, cutting down on the cost and various things of the projects. But you also want to be careful not to exclude those teams that are well ahead of the curve. They may be already buying, similar products or something else. Allowing them to play in, your ecosystem with the tools that they have that they may be comfortable with is a key part as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Ian. Raj, how has the CI/CD pipeline presented challenges for you in regards to robust integration, and what needs to be done to resurrect that situation?
So we use the CI/CD pipeline today. As I mentioned earlier, we do continuous integration. The area that I'm focused on, and I have my teams focused on, is consistency and continuous delivery or continuous deployment. Obviously, when you're doing continuous deployment in federal government especially, you have to ensure that appropriate checks and balances are done prior to deploying anything in production. So we have to make sure that as we go forward, the required automation for checks and balances are built into the CI/CD pipeline. So we want to make sure that number one, the code is of high quality. The code does not have any vulnerabilities in it, or does not introduce new vulnerabilities in it. The next thing that's on our list of agenda items to do is to ensure that our supply chain is robust. We want to make sure that the third-party libraries, the RPMs, the DLLs, whatever the developers are using, whether from open source or for commercial vendors, we want to make sure that those are also scanned SAST or DAST, doesn't matter, well, SAST especially, at least to start out, and make sure that there is, you can verify that the code that is being built is secure code. Deploying that code, that built package into higher environments, so moving up from dev into test or user acceptance test areas, and then eventually into production or pre-prod or then production, is going to require a comfort level that needs to grow across all organizational boundaries. And similar to what we heard earlier, there's generally a bigger department level department that provides shared services, and then you have your bureaus that are racing fast and furiously to deploy and embrace newer technologies. So when the boundaries of the smaller bureau and the bigger department when they come into play, that is the area where one needs to ensure that the quality and the security of the package that is getting deployed is of high quality and high security. The appropriate proofs, if you will, or artifacts, if you will, to that state that the quality has been verified by running SAST and DAST type of scans, running a scan on the infrastructure, running a scan on your supply chain, and proving those artifacts is going to help the fast and furiously moving forward teams in justifying why they want to move fast and furiously forward. So it's a little bit of an educational process. At the same time, it's a collaboration, and it has to be a process that understands the area that everyone is coming from.
Thanks, Raj.
Sure.
And sticking with the tech and the strengthening of DevSecOps for just a moment longer, David, could you please tell us about your efforts with the R&D software factory? What was it for our audience who doesn't know, and how has it strengthened your DevSecOps practices?
Sure. Well, when we initially started the effort, it was to consolidate tools and reduce some of our risk and cost. And this was about 5 years ago. But what we didn't realize is that when you start centralizing services, it reduces your attack vectors that exist in a supply chain risk situation. So to give you an analogy, if I had 100 development teams in my agency, and each one had their own tool chain, right? And they're all using different tools. You have 200-300 tools, each one with their own process. You'd have thousands of attack surfaces across that agency for adversaries to be able to, penetrate or add malicious code during a build process, like we saw with some of the recent software supply chain risk breaches. But by centralizing those core capabilities during software build, it allowed us to really strengthen and reduce those attack vectors so that we're no longer exposed. I'm not going to say we're 100%. I don't think anybody would make that claim. But having 12 products versus 200 products to secure is simply easier. It reduces your risk. Having less than a dozen or 20 processes that occur during a software build that you can audit and trace is easier than trying to manage 50 teams, each with their own CI/CD automation process using their own tools. That becomes almost impossible. You have to shift the responsibility for security to the teams versus to the enterprise. So for us, it was more or less a side effect, but we're trying to capitalize on that now and get better metrics using insider threat capabilities and other tools to strengthen that security even more. So we're really building out that sec in DevOps. So the security is built in, and then we're trying to measure it so we can optimize over time our maturity model for security. And then the last thing is, it's very hard to get to ATO in a day in a federal government, through a DevOps cycle. So especially for iteration 1. But I do think what I call security by definition, If you have a prescriptive process that's defined and repeatable, you can build in security by definition and then repeat that process to get to ATO in a day for your change cycles within your custom apps. I am a little nervous about government for software supply chain risk, to be honest, because even the executive order that just came out was really focused on vendors. I think the tougher problem to solve is all the custom code and applications that's being written mainly by the defense industrial base and contractors supporting government. And there was no mention of that in the executive order that just came out. It was really focused on software scanning and security for, this software supply chain, which is vendors like us. So I'm hoping maybe there's a broader interpretation of that when the mandates, come out to help us improve security maturity across the software builds that occur every day.
Thanks, David.
Sure.
So now shifting to emerging tech and the future of DevSecOps, and just a friendly reminder to our panelists, please try and keep your answers under 2 minutes, please, so that we can get through all of the content we want to cover. Raven, what would you like to see happen from a technical and cultural perspective when it comes to transformation and the future of DevSecOps at your agency?
I'd like to see, it's not actually in my agency, it's really in the environment. I'd like to see more standards and with the technologies out there, not necessarily with the vendors, but like with the containers, for instance. There's now the Open Container Initiative where the vendors are going to have to conform with that, which makes things more plug and play. Because for me, I feel like we're like the units and the government, we're going to get shoehorned into having to use a particular tool, and it may not be the right tool. It might be overkill. It may not have enough things. And I think that if there was a standard or a standard body that could say, this is the basic, it would help government and, industry to be able to stay on track and use whatever tools they want without having been dictated to a tool, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Ian, what are some of the concerns we should all be considering leading into the future of DevSecOps? And could you please provide some recent examples of this?
Yes, definitely. I know one of the big concerns for us as a warfare center, we are delivering software or even hardware that is going to go out to the fleet, out onto a ship. So when we're considering, moving to the cloud, standing up a hybrid cloud solution, software factory, all these great terms and everything. One of the things that we were told by the Warfare Center's chief engineer was, well, we're currently in a max telework situation where everybody is outside of the office trying to, do their work on the inside. But he gave us a kind of a thought question, and, we had to go solve it of, what it was, what's to happen if we all had to be in the office and everything on base is all we could use. At the time it seems like, oh wow, it's a great thought question, but as we've seen with the shutdown of the Colonial pipeline, that these things can very possibly happen. So if it was something, let's say with the nation's power grid, and all we had was what was stood up at in SWC Dogger, we couldn't access outside internet or outside resources, whether it be AWS or Azure. So could we still get that mission critical work done and deliver our products to the fleet, which is not going to stop on our behalf? This isn't us trying to deliver a Domino's pizza. This is delivering a lot of safety critical equipment and mission essential equipment. So the lesson that we learned is it's great to be cloud first and all that. You want to do those things, but to always have that backup plan that if what we think impossible happens, to be able to fall back on your backup plan.
Yep, absolutely. I'm sure that example is top of everyone's mind right now. So thank you for sharing that. Christopher, where do you see the future of DevSecOps going, and in what ways will emerging technologies help us get there?
Yeah, I'm not even going to talk about technology. I think that we've heard a lot today, not tech people, when it comes to the issue. We've heard that a lot. I've been hearing that for years actually now. So what I would hope for the future is that we can finally remove those silos, between our different departments. I think, platform one, awesome. They were able to start from scratch, doing it right, hiring the right people, getting the right people in place. Thankfully, they didn't have the challenges of having to change a culture of an organization that's been around for a very long time. So in our organization, we have an entire division dedicated to operations. We have an entire division dedicated to security. And within my division, my team is called DevOps, DevSecOps. So when I have an operations team that doesn't even report to me, and when I have a security division that doesn't report to me, it makes it incredibly challenging to move forward with new methods, especially DevSecOps methodology, let alone trying to move towards AI ops, getting into machine learning and things like that. So, the way that I see the future is that we no longer have these silos. People just understand. The operations team just understands we need to move towards this, or the security people say, yes, baked in security makes sense. David talked quite a bit about what I would hope security look like in the future. So for me, I hope it's really more so removing those silos.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much. And Raj, what should be the goal across agencies as it relates to DevSecOps best practices in your opinion? What should agencies be focusing on?
That's a very difficult question to answer, quite honestly, because every agency is going to have a different set of goals in front of them. But I think we need to be able to come to an intellectual agreement where we say all these things make sense. Dissolving the silos is absolutely necessary, because in order to deploy a piece of code in production, we don't and shouldn't have to jump through these multiple hoops that we go through today. The automation that is necessary to prove that what we're deploying in production is of high quality, high security, I think is going to assist us as we move forward. But at the same time, we need a set of tools, an emerging set of tools that can help not only the development team, but the ops team and the security team in ensuring that the checks and balances that they have to verify every time something gets deployed is appropriately available from those automated tools. Because if they don't provide the appropriate artifacts that are necessary, whether they're electronic or paper, it doesn't matter to me at this point. Electronic is better, obviously, because you can get electronic artifacts and merge them together and create a SIA if you have to, and get an authority to deploy in production. But the emerging tools have to look at multiple viewpoints so that the tools become valuable and the process can become smoother.
Thanks, Raj. And we'll take a quick poll break, please. Alyssa, if you could pop that up. Does your agency have plans in place or have plans to review your software supply chain security due to recent breaches? Please answer yes, no, or you have no clue. All right, on to the next question. This one's for David. How important is rationalizing products, and what other leaps does the government need to take in the future? What ultimately needs to be addressed?
Sure. Well, I think it's very important to at least have an approved product list or tool chain that in your repo, like Nicholas did in Air Force with the Platform One effort that Chris was talking about earlier. It makes it very easy, reduces the friction, and have a secure, place where you can at least pull tools from. I'm a bigger fan of having services for some of those tools than the tools themselves. It's really the process that you want to control, not necessarily the tools. So you could have multiple tools in your environment versus rationalizing, as long as they conform to a consistent process that's auditable. So you don't necessarily have to go from 200 to 12 like we did, but at least it's defined, and it's just not developers picking the tools they want. And I'm probably more concerned about the add-ins and the builds that occur, because with infrastructure as code today, that's where the real security risk is, because sometimes you're pulling in the latest version from an open source repository during a build process, which can be detrimental if it had malicious intent. So I think that's important. And I think if I had to comment, I think we need to shift more to measuring how these tools add impact to the capability of the product that's being delivered. So leveraging value stream management, during that DevOps cycle, and doing a better job with measuring, how tools can measure that value back to your mission, I think is incredibly important. If those tools aren't doing that, then you need to kind of pick other tools that can support that capability.
Awesome. Thanks, David. So before we jump into our final round of closing thoughts, I saw we had an audience question come through. What are some of the security tools the government needs to fight cybersecurity? And Raven, would you like to go ahead and answer that one?
From my perspective, thank you, Kirsten. I think from my perspective, the tools that are lacking, again, because this is from my challenges, are at the application level. The security tools, again, so everybody's mentioning how you have to make sure that you don't have bad actors and bad code and whatever, but there's not enough security tools there. So I think to combat cybersecurity, that's one area that the tools could be helpful. The other tool is the entry into the systems. And so there's a lot of security tools out there that actually look for holes and whatever patches and things that are needed in this system. But I don't know if there are a lot of tools out there that actually look for access. And access control is something that's on that the organization controls, but cybersecurity tools could be, there should be more there as well to help help prevent bad actors into a system in the beginning.
Thanks, Raven. And Chris, could you please provide or share the answer you provided as well?
Oh, yeah, sure. It's just general response. Raven got into the specifics, but I was certainly looking for SaaS tools, DaaS tools, of course, looking into that, looking at which ones are the most effective, but also, more concerned about the CD side. Raj, I think you mentioned the CD side of the house being a concern for you. And so it is for us as well, and making sure that we have container security, tools available. I know there are a lot of them out there, but as we go to implement that, does it help us? Does it also help us with the AI ops piece of that as well? And then, some of the, we're looking a lot at functional testing and what that looks like as well, and unit testing, and then even, I could go on. There's a lot of things that we're concerned about to try to bake into the process of what we need from a security standpoint.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys. We are nearing the end of our panel, so we're going to do rapid fire, 30 seconds or less. What is one thing you want to share with our audience? You want to wow them, a book, a quote, a takeaway, whatever it may be, as long as it's appropriate, I guess, or not, I don't know. Ian, let's hear from you first.
Yes, when it comes to emerging technology, I think one of the biggest things for me, and a prime example, in 1895 in Ohio, there was only 2 vehicles on the road, and they got into a car crash. So, you can have the latest and greatest technology out there, give it to your users, but if they don't know how to use it, or you don't have specific policies in place on, how they should be using it, it's basically pointless. So just make sure with all of this technology coming out, in the future, right now, you are giving your employees, giving contractors, whoever it is, the training and, setting up the policies to guide them for, future use.
And Raj?
You want a quote that's going to wow people? So I won't give you a quote, but I'll make my personal statement that I've been making for several years now. Automation is key. Everything we do today requires and will require more and more automation. Intelligent automation will definitely assist us in moving forward in a better place. The tools that are necessary for intelligent automation should be in such a way that they assist the entire development lifecycle, the CI/CD pipeline lifecycle, and the different consumers of the outputs of the CI/CD lifecycle. This is where it is going to help us immensely as we go forward. How about that for a non-quote?
Automation is key by Raj Dolas. Love it. David, over to you.
Sure. Well, if I had a quick quote, I guess it would be Drucker. You can only manage what you measure. And that's something I think we forget often, especially with DevOps and metrics. And then probably one of my favorite books, it was the Phoenix Project. You know, it was a good classical, silo smashing fictional story around DevOps and building security in. So if you haven't read it, definitely give it a read.
Will do. Thank you. And Raven.
I'm going to leave, when the poll came up, the first one about where people were in DevSecOps, it looked like that there was a lot of people who were just getting started or didn't know where to get started. And so I'm directing my advice to those people so that you can learn from my mistake. Don't get caught up in the tools. Look to see what your problem is first. What is your business problem when it comes to your software delivery? Is it in the process? Is it the people? Is it the culture? Look at that first, and from there, determine what tools you'll actually need. And if it's a cultural thing, you need to figure out how to get buy-in first, because without it, you're not going to go very far. The end.
Love it. And Chris, your turn to wow us.
Well, okay. I would just say that, I know that if you find yourself in a position to influence or lead a DevSecOps effort, then, I understand that we're leading technical projects. They are very technical in nature, but I feel like the odds are they will either fail or we won't see them as fast as we would like if we can't step back and try to understand and spend the time on how to influence or motivate or inspire others in order to take it on. Because without people to accept it or embrace it, we will likely not be fully successful. So, that would be my challenge, if there's anything, is to sit back and learn people, learn how to work with people, learn how to motivate them so that we can make these things happen.
That was so good. I love it. This was such an awesome panel. Thank you guys so much for your time, and to everyone at home, thank you all for joining us today. I would like to thank our partners again, Pivot3, Pluralsight, Checkpoint, and Micro Focus. And of course, our keynote speaker earlier, Ron Thompson, and the panelists before. So thanks, everyone. Hope to see you on Thursday for a webinar that it will be focused on edge computing and the importance of edge computing with 5G and the Internet of Things. We hope to see you there, and everyone, have a great rest of your day. Bye.
Thanks. You do the same.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kirsten. Bye.